question is, where are the Syrians who escaped now? What countries are they in?
I deliberately do not keep in touch with anybody that I took out of Syria, with the exception of everyone. You only saw the Swedes, but I took every other Jew out of Syrian prisons. I keep in touch with them because of the torture and because of the suffering that they've had. I would say that most of the people that I took out are in Bat Yam, Holon, Kiryat Ata, and Yerushalayim. Another large group is in Brooklyn, on Round Ocean Parkway, and I have a few in Mexico City. I didn't know there were any in Sao Paulo till I gave a speech there, and people stood up and said, "Mrs. Judy, do you know me?" And so there's some in Brazil. So, but really, I don't see them, but I do know basically where they all are.
Where's our mic? Question over here. Can we get the mic over to this lady in black? That'd be half the theater, this lady in black.
First of all, Judy, I've always thought of you as our personal Moshe Rabbeinu, our Moses, bringing out the people from Syria, all these Jews from Syria. I would, especially in the political climate now, to think what would happen to those Jews. It would be horrifying. And so our gratitude to you always and forever for what you have done. And I would like to ask, the question I have is, what was the reaction to the film by the Israelis when you produced and showed it in Israel?
The action. In the same week it was shown in Israel, it was the biggest rating for our program in years. So people was interested. I don't know what if nobody called me or something, but that's what can I say? Did you hear some reaction?
Well, you put it on so many times. It was the highest rating that Israel TV had in how many years? You were there. I came home.
I understand that the film started as a very short film, and then it grew. Your original intention was for a 10-minute spot.
As I said before, we intend to do it 15 minutes TV story, like 60 minutes, but we saw that the story is bigger. Judy is a great storyteller, and it's very interesting to hear the story. And we decided to do almost all the... she came to the studio for interview, and all the hour was dedicated to Judy. The hour. She was in the studio in Israel when it broadcast.
Question up?
Judy?
Way in the back.
I'm wondering if you know anything about Jews that are remaining in Syria now, what the situation is.
Of where?
Jews that are remaining in Syria currently.
Right now, there's only 22 people left. I took them all. I finished the morning of September the 11th, 2001, when I took my last family, a father and mother and 7 children. And it was very interesting because he had been, well, not interesting, because he'd been run over by a car deliberately in Damascus, and all the bones on the right side of his body were broken. And so that I had to get him on the Air Pakistan flight and take 3 seats across, because I found out later from the Maimonides Hospital, from the orthopedic surgeon, that his bones had been deliberately set wrong, and or it was done by a first-year medical student. So they had to break all his bones and put him in a cast for 6 months. So I got him with the wife and the 7 children. And that was by happenstance, because the flight that I had him on was supposed to arrive in New York right before Rosh Hashanah. But the Syrians, for whatever reason in their minds, and fortunately for him, changed the flight, and they came in at 20 to 8 in the morning of the Trade Center. That was the end where I was concerned. I was now out of business. Now there were left 27 older people in Damascus. Kamishli is Judenrein. Aleppo is Judenrein. The 26 that were left were older people. They chose to stay. I might have been able to get them, not on the escape route, because there's no way I could take them out on an escape route in their physical condition, but they had no children outside of Syria. So they decided to stay. 4 have since died. There are 22, that's all there are. There are 22 Jews left in Syria, living in one building in Damascus. And they're not bothering them now. But if somebody decides, with the civil war that's going on in Syria, somebody decides they want to kill a Jew, they've got the 22 in a building that's right next to the shul.
We have a few questions up here.
Hi, I just want to say, first of all, as a young woman, your story is incredibly inspiring, and it's a pleasure to watch that. I'm curious about the people coming into Canada and America. How did they get through immigration? Did they claim refugee status, or what was their entry into North America?
Well, first of all, there had to be the ransoming. And the people had to find me first. I never made an initiative to find a Jew in Syria. They had to find me. Each country was different. The United States had almost an open door policy. If a Jew could get out of Syria, they could get in on an immigrant, not an immigrant status, a visitor status, which would mean they'd have to have a return airline ticket, and then they would have to go back. Well, of course, nobody was going back. And I kept some of the return airline tickets because it's interesting to keep it in the file. And some of them I told, you keep the return tickets because this is something you should show your children and your grandchildren. Canada was a different story. I only got into Canada about a half a dozen young teenagers, one at a time. It depended on the government that was involved. I used to go, first of all, nobody knew I was doing a rescue. I would go to Ottawa on human rights basis. These are Jews in Syria. They're in trouble. I had a card those days from Canadian Jewish Congress to give me some credibility that I chaired a national committee so I could get a meeting with the Minister of Immigration or the Minister of External Affairs. Depending on the government, I can tell you that with some of the ministers, I was literally on my knees begging for an entry permit into Canada, for a minister's permit, or just give me 1 week for a kid. Give me 1 week in Canada. I promise you it'll be I want no money from the Canadian government. JIAS was with me. They would take care of them. All I wanted was a week because I was going to be sending them to Israel anyway. I just wanted to buy new clothes. A few of them stayed here and went to university. It cost the government nothing. And then they left. But I can tell you, depending on the government that was in power at the time, I will tell you bluntly, with the conservatives, I got everything. I was even able to use the embassy in Damascus. With the liberals, I was on my knees. I was literally once, I don't usually cry, but I have to tell you, with one person there who was the assistant to the Minister of External Affairs, I was literally crying because I had a chance of 6 orphan children. And I made a deal with the Syrians for ransom because the oldest was 14 and the youngest was 2, and I couldn't take them on an escape route. It would be impossible to take 6 kids on an escape route. It was dangerous enough, but with children, it was impossible. And they turned me down. They literally turned me down. I have letter after letter after letter where they turned me down. I was begging, literally begging, just give me a week in this country. I had every one of my friends taking one of the children, but I couldn't get them in here. Eventually I had to. I got them 2 at a time, and they didn't come to Canada.